I'd like to introduce Dr. Aoibhinn Curley, who has just joined our live panel. She's a consultant psychiatrist with the Adult ADHD Services in St. John of God Community Services and HSE in CH06, and that's been recently established. And Aoibhinn, I have down here, Aoibhinn, that you've worked with St. John of God for 17 years. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's a long time, and you're a senior lecturer in psychiatry in RCSI. So thank you for joining the panel discussion. We have behind the scenes Clodagh and Anya, who have been looking through all of the questions from the comment box down below, and they've compiled them into what we're hoping are themes, because there's no way we can get through all of them. The first one is for everybody on the panel. So what suggestions and recommendations would you put to the HSE or providing services, given your experiences over your lifetime, to improve services to young people or to adults who are at the most vulnerable period in their lives? Is there anything in particular that you would recommend, especially creative therapeutic techniques for practitioners to use to address such barriers? It's open to anybody.
I'm not sure if I fully comprehended the whole question, even though I've read it already. I'm still not sure if I comprehended it, but I'll answer it as I think I did, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I think so. Rather, I know you asked about the HSE specifically, but professionals working with people, like if I can mention that instead, I think there needs to be more getting rid of like hierarchies. Hierarchies is probably the wrong word, but like the doctor or the professional isn't there to fix the person, but it's a joint process that's happening, and both are learning from each other. And I think it's really important. Like I remember when I got better, as if it suddenly just happened all the blue out of nowhere, but the people said, oh, didn't such and such a person help you really? And didn't that really help you? And no one really acknowledged the role that I played in getting me better. And I think it's really important, because until I started to realize how much like all these therapies didn't work unless I put the work in. Knowing that you're the fundamental part of the process is really important in order to be able to do it when you get back to a difficult place, that you have the ability to do it on your own. So I don't think that answers your question at all, but that was just thoughts. Sorry.
I would echo that. I think people are experts in their own experience, and to be listened to more and actually asked what they feel they need. So you're given more autonomy and more, the freedom to express actually what you need, along with obviously maybe, some people sometimes don't know what they need, but some advice and some direction, but definitely to be listened to.
Can I add to this as well, Sonia? Jessica and both Katrina have spoken so eloquently of that absolute need. And particularly in Jessica's earlier talk, I mean, you spoke about, I suppose, the difficulty in, I suppose, the fit between the services or the supports that you needed at that really vulnerable time of your life, and how difficult it was to get that level of awareness and support from the people that you turn to help. And I think this is, a common theme in services in general, mental health services, that, the kind of awareness and training of people who are neurodivergent with mental health difficulties or who are in crisis. This is something that the awareness is building, but it needs to be improved, and the specific training and supports needs to be improved as well. In Johanna's talk, she spoke about, in her research, just becoming very painfully aware of just how limited therapeutic resources were available for some of the young people that she saw. And I think that echoes, I suppose, some of the descriptions from Jessica as well, in terms of her inpatient stay and just the limited amount of talking therapy or psychotherapeutic work that was available to her, or even things like art therapy. And I thought the second point, I suppose, then is, and I think, Jessica, you spoke about this earlier, about just the importance of early identification of people with neurodivergent conditions such as ASD or ADHD, and the importance of supports at that early stage, and what difference that could make you know, to someone's life path and their journey, and how they manage difficulties as they emerge as well. And similar to what Katrina said, in terms of, you know, that support with trauma and the difference that it's made to her life as well. And I guess ultimately it would be really, you know, interesting to hear more from the contributors like Jessica and Katrina about, you know, what, you know, particular supports might have made the difference to them as neurodivergent people, you know, in a system that's still very neurotypical.
That brings us on very nicely to the next question, which is about qualitative research. So like getting that lived experience from people who have gone through the system. And this one was directed towards Jessica Bramham, but you know, anybody who wants to contribute, please do. So there were a number of questions asking whether there are plans for qualitative research, so perhaps involving focus groups to ask people who are ADHDers or autistic where there is the highest risk of suicide. And this could lead to more insight and more variables to do with larger quantitative methods afterwards. So I suppose that lived experience piece they're asking, is there scope for that going forward, Jessica?
I hope so. I mean, I guess the more I kind of got into this area, the more I realized that that's definitely the way to go. I suppose I was rather nervous about doing this work. I have to admit that I thought that it would be very uncomfortable for people to talk about, and that it was kind of not in the best interest. But actually what I've learned is that it can be very therapeutic is the wrong word, but it sharing the story and being able to give back and be able to make change from what's happened to somebody is a very powerful thing to happen. So I'm less nervous and more willing to kind of go in that direction, and obviously with advice from people in the know, because I think that you know, me just deciding on a whim is not the right approach. So it's really helpful to have been here this evening and to hear these thoughts and suggestions. So thank you, everyone.
The next question was a theme that was popping up in the question and answer box. Where are neurodivergent adults supposed to go if they have psychological difficulties? Looking at the research that was presented this evening, they're looking at, is it possible to think that because young people discontinue meds at 21, this is because there are little or no public medical professional supports available to them, and private fees at the moment are prohibitive to access medication. So where does the HSE stand on ADHD model of care across the country?
I just say there's also a paucity of GPs that are educated around neurodiversity. Like, I'm in a lot of groups and I see people saying, I finally got the courage up to go say to my GP, I think I have autism or I think I have ADHD, and would they refer me to the relevant service? And particularly with ADHD, GPs saying that they didn't believe in it and refusing to refer, which is just awful for somebody who've gotten the courage to, you know, finally take that step for themselves and to be met with that. So there definitely needs to be broader education for general practitioners around neurodiversity, and particularly adult neurodiversity. You know, it's not just a childhood disorder.
Could I make a comment there as well? That I've been saying this time and time again recently about the services that are available. If you were to design this from scratch, you wouldn't have designed this setup necessarily in terms of having things separated and bolt on things, and it would be all about education from the beginning. I guess the difficulty is that there are so many people, there's a big system to change, and that it has to be incremental, and certainly the service rollout has been incremental, and the lack of funding is apparent. But yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it isn't ideal, but things are moving slowly.
I guess to echo just what Katrina and Jessica have said, you know, as someone who's working in a kind of a startup adult ADHD service under the National Clinical Programme. So there's 3 teams now operational in the country. So there's one where I am, which is Southeast Dublin, Wicklow, that's CHO6. There's one in Limerick, that's CHO3, I believe, and then one in Sligo, Leitrim, Donegal. So it's only the start, you know, and what I'm really conscious of from the 9 months or so that I've been working in it is just the degree of unmet need in this area, and, you know, a small, tiny service really. And I suppose just as things go forward, the degree of, I suppose, investment and, you know, networking with all services to try and begin to address the degree of unmet need. The other thing I think that Katrina said, and I think this is something that's really relevant, is like we have the start of, you know, a service for adults with ADHD, but there is very limited resourcing for people with ASD or who are autistic, and that is a massive service gap. And for, you know, for those of us who are experts by experience, as well as people who work in the area, you know, none of these neurodivergent conditions exist in silos. There's massive overlap between all of these conditions. This is something that we're really noticing as well.
And Ken has just popped up in the chat that all the CHOs have applied for a service such as the one that Aveen is involved in setting up and running at the moment. So hopefully there is some positive change coming in the near future. Next question is, I have experience of going to therapists who seem to have one idea of what can help or fix me. And if I didn't help, I was subtly made to feel that it was my fault. And the question is, on reflection of neurotypical brain, is this a reflection of neurotypical brains, or is it a result of culture and education? And most importantly, is there something we can do to educate neurotypical people on how to create spaces and address people's needs? Oops, sorry, I'm reading them off my phone here. Even if they don't 100% understand those needs.
I think one of the most powerful things that actually my last psychologist said to me was just what she always used to say to me was, this is just how you are in the world. And it was so validating and accepting and loving, you know what I mean? So I don't know, I seem to have struck gold with the people that I got, because they very much accepted me as I was. And, you know, one did a lot of sensory work with me. So I was able to play with stuff while I talked, because, you know, you're talking about difficult stuff. But you have to be, I suppose, yeah, you have to develop that trust with somebody to be able to open up. And I'm really sorry that that person had that experience, because I want everyone to have the great experience that I had to put me on that path to healing. But try again, don't give up, because it may be just you didn't click with that person, or they obviously weren't right for you.
I think nobody really likes uncertainty. And I think, well, for me, always kind of understanding why these things were happening from a very kind of methodological point, like a practical point of view, helped. So I think often when people are met with other people that are different from them, that they don't understand, one way that they deal with uncertainty is to kind of explain it away. And I think that it could kind of be your fault. This is something that's going on with you that we don't understand, is a way for them to deal with their own uncomfortableness around their own uncertainty. So it could just be that's going on. But I found that I had to kind of take the lead in therapy and stuff. Like the best therapy I did, I talked at my psychologist for about 3 years, and that helped a lot. She didn't really get a word in edgeways, and she'd come up with suggestions and I'd go, well, actually, I don't think we'll do that. I think we'll do something else. And that really helped. So I think when you're, it's hard to, I've never actually seen an autistic therapist, or a neurodivergent therapist, I don't think. Maybe a psychiatrist, but not a therapist. But I think, no, I'm sorry, I've forgotten what I was going to say. Sorry.
Does anybody else want to weigh in on how best to educate, I suppose, neurotypical individuals about standards of care and how to provide supports to neurodivergent populations? I know it's a theme that's been popping up quite a bit, the fact that we do need increased amounts of education, but any ideas of how we might go about doing that? And is the onus on the neurodivergent person? No,
Can I jump in again?
Sure,
Sorry.
Jess, yeah.
I don't think the onus is on one or the other. I think it's about creating like a shared communication. I think often the onus is put on the neurodivergent person in an unfair way. But yeah, I think it definitely needs to be a back to like my original answer, which wasn't to your question either, I suppose, like this. I think it needs to come back to collaboration all the time. And being okay with not understanding, but still being in that space together. Again, I didn't answer your question again, sorry.
No, and it's a big question, and the answer possibly isn't available here tonight. It's something that we work towards. And people saying that that answered it very sufficiently in the chat as well. So there's a question here in general, and I don't know if anybody has the answer to this, but are you at an even higher risk of suicide with a dual diagnosis if you're both autistic and ADHD? Would anybody know if there's research on that? No?
I don't know if there is, but obviously there are lots of reasons why you might think that with some of the challenges, but I'm not aware of any research. I don't know if you are, Jessica.
I don't know. I haven't seen anything on that, but again, I would make the assumption, unfortunately, that the more challenges people face, the more likely it might be. But yeah, don't know.
I think in particular, autistic women are very vulnerable. Like my son would, be wary of me around people because he said, "You're so naive, and you attribute how good you are as a person to everybody else, and I don't pick up on the nuances or the subtle things that other people might pick up on, that someone's lying to me." So definitely, I think autistic women are certainly more vulnerable because we're more vulnerable to be preyed upon and lied to and manipulated. That's certainly been my experience, and it's made me very wary of people. So I would think that, yes, there is probably a higher risk of suicide because of those things. You know what I mean? Because you're not fitting into society, or you're not able to navigate social relationships in the same way. I mean, I want social relationships, but I just find them very difficult. And if you're not anchored with that support through a friendship group, you are more vulnerable. Your mental health will be more precarious.
I think one of the takeaway messages from this is that there's a lot that's unknown out there with regards to research and lived experience and statistics. And I think I was looking through some of the Q&As that were coming out in the box, and people were asking, well, how is it that we don't know the number of completed ADHD suicides? Like, is that not recorded in national statistics? And the answer is no, it's not. I think this area is such a new topic of exploration for clinicians. And we have now that neurodivergent voice that's coming through in research as well, which changes everything and changes the lens at which we look at risk and suicide in those populations. So I think these are all questions that I think researchers are currently asking themselves, and neurodivergent individuals are asking themselves. And I'd be hopeful that in the next coming decades that we have some answers to some of these questions, but at the moment it's just unknown.
It's also hidden because there's so many undiagnosed adults.
Very true. Absolutely. And, with the movement towards more adult awareness and acceptance of neurodivergence, and services being developed in order to support later in life diagnosis, again, we're going to see a shift in statistics and a shift in knowledge around these issues, which before wouldn't have been available to us. So I think it's a bit of a wait and see, but it's important to be having these questions now at the beginning stages of these research, and for clinicians in particular to be aware of what's happening and what the risks are, which is the purpose of the webinar this evening. I have a couple more questions if people are okay for a couple more. Yeah. Okay. I've noticed a lot of misinformation about ADHD, trauma, and mental health in general on social media, especially TikTok, Instagram, etc. Is there something that you've encountered from service users about how to increase public accurate awareness, I suppose?
Can I comment on that? It's a conversation we actually had this morning about misinformation that's available for people on social media, and that's really things that aren't helpful or accurate, may be leading people to mistakenly believe that ADHD is something that it's not. We, a bit of a plug, we've launched last week the adult ADHD app, which was researched for accurate information and is specific to Ireland, and that's available now. You can download that from the App Store. If you put in ADHD app, then it comes up. I think that's the right term to write. Oh no, is it adult ADHD? Oh, let me just check it. Sorry. Better not give misinformation here. ADHD in adults is the app. Yeah, it looks like that. So we've curated, I suppose, a selection of self-help pieces of information and information about the services that are out there at the moment, and it will be updated regularly, and hopefully doesn't include any misinformation.
And I don't know, Aileen, if that misinformation has impacted on referrals to your service. Have you noticed anything on your end from a clinical perspective?
I think the increased awareness of ADHD and other divergent conditions, it's a really helpful thing. And I suppose as part of this increased awareness, on social media, it's not surprising maybe that, there's some depictions of ADHD and other conditions that might be misrepresentative. But again, it all goes back to the same, I suppose, theme coming through from our discussion tonight about the need for greater awareness among health systems, among schools, among the public in general. And I would hope that as time goes by, this kind of comes through more clearly about what ADHD is and maybe what ADHD isn't. I know there's a lot of information circulating on TikTok at the moment, some helpful, maybe some less helpful. Certainly we're seeing a lot of interest from people seeking referral, I guess, because the service that we have is so small and there's such pent-up demand. The kind of feedback I've had from people is that there's been, a long time to wait for assessment. People have been kind of suffering, for years with their difficulties, looking for assessment. I've had far more of that than people maybe who don't have difficulties that will be consistent with ADHD seeking assessment, maybe for other reasons. It's been certainly much more of the former, which really reflects the massive unmet need in this area.
I don't know if any of the panelists have any final closing comments that they would like to make, or a takeaway message, or to contribute anything further.
Can I say back to your very original first question that I've only just processed now, that the HSE needs to be more aware of the sensory environment. And by that, I do not mean just decreasing all sensory information. I mean like the balance and the correct balance for different people. So I think that's really important. I find hospitals in general tend to either be way too overloading, or they have no oh my God, I forgot the word, sensory stimulus at all. So balance in everything is really important.
And also not everyone that has engaged with the HSE has had a positive experience. Like I've been very lucky, I guess. I don't know why, that I just was met with openness and, acceptance. But a lot of people, the services, I suppose, you can't are not consistent for people. So some people who have great experiences and some people who have absolutely horrific experiences. And I would like to see that change, because everybody deserves the proper help, to live a fulfilling and healthy life.
Okay, I'd like to just remind everybody who is here as an attendee tonight, and indeed our panelists too, if you are impacted negatively in any way by any of the content that we've discussed this evening, we'll be putting the holding slide up just as you're leaving as well. Please do take note of the contact details or the text service, depending on your preferred method of communication. And hopefully you reach out and get some support if you found it particularly overwhelming this evening. And Ken has just put them in the chat function again for everybody as well, I've just seen. A big thank you, just to echo all the comments in the chat that are coming through at the moment from the attendees. A big thank you to all of the speakers this evening and our panelists contributors. To Aileen, to Jessica Bramham, to Jessica K. Doyle, to Katrina Nichols, and to Johanna, who's not here, Joanna Clancy. A big thank you to all of you guys. I have a list of other thank yous just to get through before we leave, and it gives people an opportunity to put some messages in the chat as well. A thank you to the Psychological Society of Ireland's Autism Special Interest Group. So Jessica K. Doyle is our current chair, and Anya Kennedy is also here, who's been compiling the questions in the background for our Q&A at the end. To ADHD Ireland, and in particular Ken Kilbride, who's here, who's been doing all of the tech work behind the scenes. So thank you very much to Ken. And to Lucina Cams, Claude and Eve Raylon, another one of our question compilers, who was the one that was messaging me with all the questions during that Q&A session. Thank you to her. And the St. John of God Research Foundation, who really did most of the bulk of the organising for this evening and getting everything off the ground. And particularly Leslie O'Hara, who's not here as a panelist discussion because she's in the audience as an attendee to make sure that everything is coming across okay at the other end. From the audio and things like that. And she's also been going fantastically well with the tweets as well for this evening. So she's been keeping the social media campaign going and updating people on what's going on in the chat. Kalyani Budu from the St. John of God Research Foundation, and Louise Sims as well, deserve a special mention for their contributions. So a whole host of people worked together to put this evening into place and to make sure that there was a forum for discussion. What I think was a very relevant and worthwhile thing to discuss and to consider, and I think has left us with more questions than answers, but good questions to be having in our mind when we go forward. So thank you to everybody. Thank you for our attendees as well. Go forth and bring the message into your workplaces, into your families, and into your personal lives as well.